This is Wayward Radio, your official source for news and information on the Wayward Realms. Greetings, fellow wanderers, and welcome to Wayward Radio, your ultimate gateway of untold stories, hidden lore, and the latest updates from OnceLost Games' epic creation, the Wayward Realms. I'm Joe, your host and fellow explorer, and I'm ready to guide you through a world of mystery, magic, and mayhem. Today, we're taking a deeper look at what makes the Wayward Realms unique and getting into the bottom of the concept of the grand RPG. And helping us to explore that topic, we have two guests with us today. Ted Peterson, the CEO of OnceLost Games and game director of the Wayward Realms.
Hello.
Hey, Ted. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Hope you are.
Absolutely. You're looking good today. I like the, is that mauve or is that, what color is that you're wearing there?
I'll call it purple.
Purple?
Yeah, but probably could be fancier than...
It's a nice deep purple. I like it. It's close to the red side.
Thank you.
And Victor, creative producer of the Wayward Realms, is with us.
Glad to be here. Honored to be, for me and Ted to be the first returning guests to the podcast.
Victor, I have to say, the latest trailer promoting the podcast has gone over so well. But they got you on there saying that you hate playing video games. We have to address the elephant in the room.
I was set up, I tell you. Set up.
It's not true, I tell you. It's not. The controversy has just blown through OnceLost Games. We're like, how could we have gotten this guy in here?
We had bad news for him.
I did see a comment that somebody said, like, you don't have to be a fan of games to make a good game or something like that. So,
okay, you have one defender.
I can be a better critic that way. But no, obviously, I love video games. That's why I'm here doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, some of those comments that we saw on YouTube were really funny, and that one in particular I had seen. I was like, oh man, people are taking this seriously. It's all right. So the grand RPG. When I have to admit, when I first read this piece on the website on waywardrealms.com, I thought to myself, like, well, there's some RPGs out there that are pretty flippin' grand. What could they mean? Like, how could this differentiate itself? And I was both excited and skeptical at the same time. My first reaction was like, grand RPG? There's a lot of grand ones out there. Right. Oh, they probably got something up their sleeve.
A couple of things up our sleeve. We have big sleeves.
Yeah. I've been noticing, and I mean, so I'm really interested. Not only just personally, but the concept of the grand RPG. I'm really excited for this particular episode because I really want to dive into it. But first, I want to sort of kind of go back on obviously the Wayward Realms is supposed to be a game that sort of takes a look at what's going on right now and sort of either puts it in a different direction or kind of levels up a little bit. What are the current limitations in RPGs that inspired the development of this game?
I mean, I think it obviously began with the early history when first started doing role-playing games in the early 90s, and there was there were a bunch of fabulous games that were that had come out with the ultimate underworlds and games like that, which were not only technically technologically things we hadn't seen before.
Sure.
But non-linear, these enormous worlds, and we kind of grabbed that ball and ran with it hard with especially the first two Elder Scrolls games. And so to some degree, it's a return to that direction that was going, and then it seemed like they kind of got smaller again.
Right.
There's certainly lots of examples of pretty epic games out there, but there's always something in them where it's a linearity or a you know uh, lack of consequences for the player's actions that we said, okay, well, none of those rules should apply to us. Um, and so the question was, what was the origin of the term, or you know
No, really more on the inspiration. On the so obviously we've got games out right now that have technical limitations. What limitations have you been seeing that inspired you to make Wayward Realms?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is creative limitations. To be honest, I mean, I think once we start getting, standing on the shoulders of all the people who've been working on Unreal, and all of the progresses that have been made on that. Back in the day, any type of system we had to kind of create ourselves. We had to create the engine by ourselves and everything. So once we have that hurdle overcome, then we can spend a lot more time world building and figuring out the gameplay that obviously isn't out there, but we would have been spending so much time uh, building the engine that we wouldn't have been able to have the time for it. So and all these other developers also have that same ability, but I think that there's you kind of have to have the be a new gang that's doesn't just fall back on all the things that you've been making recently and saying, well, we have to build on what we built the year before in order to create this game. Um, yeah, I think that as far as limitations go, I mean, there's certainly some limitations that we're not in the stage where every single thing we can possibly imagine is doable, and we have to do trade-offs,
Oh, sure.
any other company. Um, but I do think that as far as what our competition, what we're doing that's technically above our competition, I think that if they had spent the time we've had, in doing things like, working on the virtual game master or
Mm.
our proc gen systems and things like that, then they could be where we are. But I think we have to be the canary in the coal mine to say, yeah, this is doable, and then see if imitation might be the sincerest form of flattery.
Right. I really like I really like the simile that you used there for the canary in the coal mine, and also I like the fact that you called back to Ultima Underworld. Ultima Underworld really was a watershed moment in RPGs. You've got, and in that I mean you've got RPGs that were a certain way before that game, and then after that, games aspired afterward.
Oh yeah, no, and you can look at all every successful game has its clones. So, but you
Correct.
do think, hey, yeah, that first person perspective. Obviously, we ran with it, after they did it as well. So in some ways we were kind of a clone, but we were also saying, hey, let's get they were dungeon romps, and saying, okay, well, let's take it outside.
Yeah, there's so much more to Arena and Daggerfall than you saw in Ultima Underworld. It may have been first person with 3D 3D environment, true 3D environment, and sure, Arena and Daggerfall, picked that up, but picked it up in a way that it's like a platform and ran with it. Where especially in Daggerfall, which I'm actually doing a playthrough right now, the storyline is just so intricate. You didn't have that in Ultima
That's
Underworld.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, moving along here into the grand RPG. I mean, what concepts are you focused on that make Wayward Realms, unique?
Victor, you wanna take this one, or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think, well, unique in the sense that people just aren't really making this kind of game anymore. Like, again, going back to like Daggerfall, Ultima, like that kind of design philosophy has kind of fallen by the wayside.
Hmm.
And so I think we're kind of sticking out a bit just by bringing that classic design philosophy back, where we do want those deep systems. We the scale of Daggerfall, obviously another thing that is very important to our design. We want it to feel real, feel like a real world, kind of simulate that out, make you feel like you're lost in this actual space. And I think like more games really just kind of want to focus in and give the player a sort of guided experience, while we're more about the openness. Like, here's a huge world, we're going to throw you in there, you find a way, a way for yourself. You decide what your adventure is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I like how you're saying that it's unique because you're kind of no one is calling their game a CRPG anymore. I mean, have you thought about actually leaning into that marketing wise and saying like, okay guys, it's a role playing game, but you know what? This is actually a CRPG. I mean, I think that would get some like I don't know, man, like some D&D second edition folks. Like I think it get them super excited.
Yeah, I think we have discussed it before in the past and thrown the term around, but I can't remember our exact reasons for just kind of, I guess, just trying to stick more traditional, or not traditional, but more modern traditional, I guess,
Yeah.
as opposed to the classic. But yeah.
But that's one of the philosophies here is kind of harken back to the old CRPG era of the 80s and 90s.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in philosophy, but obviously, like I said, technologically, well, not only technologically, things progress and some things, it's been a shifting platform. But there are parts where the controls on Daggerfall, by modern standards are pretty pretty hard to grasp. And the one that I always think about, that which is because we just did the 30th anniversary of Arena last year, and we
Wow.
were doing you know it was the first edition Dungeons and Dragons that we all played, and for an example, the armor class, the lower it is, the better.
Yes,
And
back up.
nowadays everyone's doing like, I don't understand. I just put on like the best armor I could get, and now it's saying I have a -2 armor class, and you're like, that's fantastic.
That's fantastic. You
Yeah,
definitely hit armor class 0 and did better.
exactly. So yeah, there's a part where we have our pillars of once we decided we wanted to do a spiritual successor to Daggerfall specifically. Um, we kind of put together the pillars of what someone would be playing that would expect that to be, and those have remained as much as anything very sacred. That doesn't mean that we can't say, all right, well, here's some things that you know 30 years ago have not aged well or weren't even very well implemented at the time, but that can still be the guiding philosophy, as long as you say, okay, well, here's the follow through. I mean, the example you were giving also about of when you get plunked into the world and you kind of have to find your own way. We had a lot of that in Daggerfall as well, but we weren't great on communicating that to the player. We have a reputation system in Wayward Realms, and one of the things on that is to say, learning from experience. If age brings you wisdom and wisdom is helpful at all, then you're like, well, we can't have the reputation system be so much in the background that the player just walks into a village and everyone hates them, and the player doesn't have any idea why.
Yeah. Yes, that's actually something I was kind of running into in my playthrough of Daggerfall. I had accepted a quest from someone in the court of the castle of Daggerfall, and I had no idea that accepting this quest, which is taking a necklace and bringing it to somebody, was going to make me, a pariah to
Right.
a lot of folks. And I was, pretty upset with you, Ted, after.
You're not the only one, but yeah.
I was
So
like,
I'm not to say that like that exact same question, Wayward Realms might exist, but you're gonna know, you know, along the way, like what the consequences of, we're sure gonna have consequences of your actions, but it's not really fair if, and we would have weird, intricate ones where like this, a lot of things, same things we're doing in Wayward Realms, where this faction hates this faction. And if you do something for this faction and that faction finds out about it, they're going to be pissed off at you. But we got to let the player know, okay, well, you might want to stay away from these guys because of this reason.
I love that. Okay, so just to kind of sum up, current limitations, we're really looking at a lot of creative limitations that that other folks out there, the competition, are just not taking on. So those are the current limitations that sort of inspired Wayward Realms, and a lot of the philosophy, a lot of the concepts you're focusing on that turn this into a grand RPG are very much rooted in the tenets of the CRPG from the 80s and 90s, and that feeling of, there's just, our world doesn't have, borders around it that you can't just, there's a mountain range there, you can't go on, like,
Right.
it's going to feel very much like Daggerfall, where, you can take that ship out to Wayrest or, Icalon, and go from there, and there's quests there and places. So in that way, am I hitting it right?
You put it
I would
well.
say so.
Awesome. All right. So this is what we're talking about, dear listener. When we get into the grand RPG, this is kind of what the direction here is. Now, taking these ideas and these philosophies of the grand RPG, in what way do these ideas meet with technology in order to deliver your vision? I think the last time we spoke, Ted, you had said that Daggerfall just could not, it couldn't do everything you wanted it to do because of technological limitations. How is that not a problem this time around?
Well, it's been 30 years, so
Yeah.
so a lot of stuff has changed. I mean, obviously, you've got if you play through Daggerfall, all of the enemies are 2D. Actually, the interesting thing about Daggerfall is it was kind of the beginning of having some 3D modeling, because a lot of even though there's sprites in Daggerfall, they
Yeah.
were modeled in 3D and then converted to 2D. But the advantage of that was we actually expanded our bestiary quite a bit, because we would take a model of a warrior, say, and then so we'd have this full 3D representation of a dude in armor, and then we could add a fire particle effect to him, and thus he became a fire Daedra. So
Ah,
it ended up kind of helping the pipeline, along the way. And again, there's a good number of those those type of shortcuts that are available now that weren't available at the time. So it's a huge advantage, and even tool sets. Uh, Things we can do with sound. I think that there was, obviously had some, it's our same composer that we had on Arena and Daggerfall was
yes.
on board for this. And
Yeah.
back in the day, it was all doing MIDI things. So
Yeah.
and now we've had discussions where we say, obviously we want everything, and we that stuff was in those early games where it'd say, okay, well, the weather has changed and now it's snowy, and now we're gonna do music that has a little jingle, a little bells and stuff like that
Yes.
going on it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a lot more sophisticated. So there's almost in every department there have been so many advantages, and doing that research and finding out what it is, saying, okay, well, let's let's not kind of rebuild the pyramids if we've already got a whole lot of it built.
Fantastic. So what you're saying is, due to the massive advancements that have happened in the last 30 years, you're able to tell the story, in a lot more of an efficient way, in a lot better, and there's more than, there's more than just quest text that tells a story. You're right. When you were talking about Eric Heberling's score, moving from a MIDI soundtrack into a full score that can be heard while playing a game, there's so many different. I mean, there's a galaxy of tones, that the player can
Sure.
hear from one versus the other.
And back in the day, we would have. I'm pretty sure there was just one channel. So, if you're going through a dungeon and be playing creepy music, and then a monster would be there and go roar, and then the music would stop while the monster said roar, and then so like now little things like that where you go like, oh, okay,
Right.
well, that's useful. So having all of that tonal stuff that goes with it, having things that have changed as far as how you're going to be having NPC conversations and letting them animate during that and show facial expressions and things like that. The sophistication of the models is obviously leaps and bounds ahead of that. So all of this kind of leads to a more immersive world.
Yeah, I would say it's really like we're able to do a lot more detail than what was possible back with Daggerfall. So like, like even just as far as environments, you can have a lot more detailed environments. It's just naturally more immersive because of that, right? Instead of all just kind of blocky and
Oh, sure.
sprites, and
Well, yeah,
then
in Daggerfall, we would if you went from uh, what's it, the Bretons play High Rock, and then down to the Red Guards place. Why can't I think of it?
Hammerfell.
Hammerfell. Thank you. Jeez. That it would be the exact same town layouts, and in fact, the way
Mhm.
the procedural generation went on building towns was to kind of make these little town blocks and rotate them and connect them in different ways. And going, well, we can do better, than that philosophically now. We're actually doing like procedural generated buildings, but they end up being kind of built from the ground up so that they are, they make sense, but and they're unique. But it's not just like the same building that you see all over the place with different textures on it, which is what
Right.
we did on Daggerfall.
Mhm.
Yeah. About about that, onto, I wanted to ask about, the competition as well. And sort of, paint this question or look through this question through the lens of today's competition. Um, the idea of the grand RPG, is not being, uh, how should I say it? The idea of the grand RPG is not being, met with satisfaction, according to your creative vision. How is technology going to meet that creative vision compared to your current day competition?
I mean, we could think of like what Baldur's Gate 3 or something like that, which
Mm.
I mean, we've talked about it before that we have some similar design philosophies where consequence and uh, you know uh, you know that that type of freedom of gameplay. Um, but I think that the grand RPG, like Victor was saying, it has something to do with scale. So if
Yeah.
you're not going to be, if you're going to be creating a world the size of Wayward Realms, that's just not feasible. If you're going to, put down, get an artist to put down every flower in, you know, that exists in this enormous place. So
Right.
uh, there have been a lot of uh, improved. ProcGen has been a dirty word for a while, and in fact, to some degree, we helped make it a dirty word because there's if you play a whole lot of Daggerfall, there is a sameness, and you start recognizing, yeah, this is how this was constructed. So we say, okay, well, we're not going to do it the same way, and we have the tools and technology to be able to, you know. Create a world. Back in the day, obviously, every time you walked into a building, we had to load. The game loaded because we couldn't have the whole world with all the interiors loaded at the same time.
Right.
And we still can't have like the entire world rendered as you're walking down the square, but we can have a lot of it, and the interiors of buildings as well as the exteriors. So some of it's technological advances, some of it is going like, okay, well, this is what we did the last time. We still want it to be this enormous scale, but we don't want it to be done the same way. And what's gotten better that we can take advantage of.
Okay. Now onto gameplay and character creation. How does your concept of the grand RPG inform character creation for you?
Do you want to take this, Victor?
Sure. I think one of the biggest thing, and Ted's the biggest proponent of this, is just giving the player that freedom to be or play rather however they want to play, right? Have their character I guess break outside the bounds of what you normally see in the RPGs, or like, where it's mostly combat, right? Like for 90% of the time, we really want to say like, how crazy can you get with this? Like, can you just talk your way through this whole thing? Talk yourself out of any situation? Can you sneak around, like a major enemy, stuff like that? We really want to create the system that just lets the player do what they want to do and let that system, or rather the world around them, react to what they are doing. And a big part of that is also like incorporating a large language model, LLM, into our VGM. So that helps. It helps the VGM understand what the player is up to, right? It kind of parses out that information, sees like, what are they trying to do? How do they want to play? Who are their allies? Who are their enemies? What kind of weapons do they prefer? Do they like to talk their way out of situations? And then just sort of, we can then take that information and start putting out new quests and challenges and stuff based on that.
Well, the one I always get inspired by is, I think I've mentioned this before, is there's a YouTuber who has a whole series of Daggerfall Unity games that he plays, where he's created a character called the Mad Genius, where he took the most, the skills that we put into Daggerfall, and luckily, thanks to modders today, actually went from being pretty useless to pretty useful, where it's all of these languages. And so you can communicate with certain semi-intelligent beasts, and he ends up going around, and he has no combat skills, no magic skills, but he has this ability to kind of speak with animals, and they follow him around and do all of his fighting for him. And he's done like 50 videos with the guy playing through playing through Daggerfall with this very bizarre character that really was basically an attempt to break the game, to say okay, I'm sure that nobody ever expected this type of character to be made, and it's a really fun series to watch. So that's kind of been part of our inspiration, is to say, we all have kind of our go-to characters that we tend to play in role-playing games, but if people start going like, there are also those players who say, hey, I just have this really weird idea for a character, and we want to support them.
That is fantastic. So Regarding gameplay, I want to propose a scenario. Okay, I have a very high. Let's just say it's charisma. We're all familiar with D&D here, and so I have very high charisma. I walk inside of a dungeon. I'm staring down a huge undead skeletal mage, not quite a lich, all right, but maybe like a necromancer. And I tell this guy, am I able to, at that point, would I be able to, engage in a conversation, or is he ready to just throw down simply because I'm on his turf?
It's going to kind of depend on, I guess, kind of weird to say like this, but like your relationship with that lich, so to speak, because
Right.
again, like one of the things we really want to do is have that like your choice of factions mean something, and so maybe you are allied with a faction where that lich doesn't see you quite as an enemy or someone that they need to take out of the way, or you could be aligned with some like a holy order. It's like, yep, you're walking in here, you're you're
Yeah,
trouble,
it
I'm
doesn't matter.
taking you
You
out
could have
right
a
away.
super high charisma, but he's not buying it.
Right.
Hmm.
So,
So yeah, the trick would be to be able to get that opportunity, I guess, to talk to them, and then if you did have that high charisma, maybe you can work out something. But
but it is a possibility that, let's just say, I might be, aligned with some, shadowy organization, and I could walk in, and instead of, having a throwdown fight every single time with an undead mage, I could, talk him out of this fight.
mhm.
With that's actually a
Yeah,
possibility.
yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, it
Wow.
obviously depends on certain creatures, certain unintelligent creatures. Like if you said just a zombie, then yeah, you don't develop factional relationships with
Right.
zombies. They don't care. They're your food, and that's the
That's
final
it.
the final thing on that. But if you're talking about something, vampire, lichy, what we call the intelligent undead, then yeah, that's definitely a possibility. We've got a lot of vampires specifically. We have a lot of lore written on them, uh, and it only works if you actually have ability to chat with them.
Wow. Now, what are the bounds on this? I mean, okay, I have a conversation with a vampire. I mean,
Or
able
tribute.
to am I able to say like, "Hey, follow me and let's get into some dirty work at the local town," or would it go that far, or would it basically kind of stop at, "Listen, I don't want to fight you and just leave me alone," and you've got a possibility of them accepting that.
Well, I guess that's sort of still a question that's on the table, right? Because we do have to sort of balance at some point and
Right.
say like, where are those limits? How far can we take this? And then do we have the systems to support that? Like, obviously, if you're going to have a vampire follow you, well, you need a companion system in place, and then how deep does that go? Can that allow for a vampire follower? So
Right.
we're kind of a bit early to really say for sure on that, but like it's definitely something that we have on our minds and thinking like, could we do that? How could we support that? What would it take to get us to support that? So
And even if outside of vampires or whatever, like the king could like you a whole lot, but if you tell him like, "Come on, let's go into this dungeon and start fighting," he's like, "I'm the king." You know, I will richly reward you for your quests, and feel free to wander around my castle at will. But that's probably asking a lot. You know,
Yeah, got it. All right. So it sound wow. So I'm really getting a picture here on what you mean by grand RPG, and it's even right down to the concept of character creation. Being able to expand the boundaries of what's currently available right now, to things like non-combat characters. I think is tremendously exciting. I'll never play it, but
that's fair. No, I mean a lot of the things we do design where we go like, it's not
right.
not for me, but there's people out there who want to play someone who's an aristocrat, and spends a lot of time hobnobbing with the royalty, and might have a little bit of swordsmanship, but that's not the primary thing.
Yeah, one of the things I do love, especially about Dungeons and Dragons, is I love playing a paladin. And one of the things I like about that type of character is the way I play them is they're always looking for the common good, trying to help people out, and that doesn't always mean that I wanna throw down with the local bandit. I may want to try and listen, man. I know why you're out here, pickpocketing, and I'd like to convince you to not do that today. And here's how I'm going to help you. Here's 5 gold. There's a place to stay over there. I want you to, I don't want you to, don't sell me death sticks. I want you to go home and rethink your life.
But it falls in the line of our quest designs, where again, you might have a thing of you need to rid the quest goal is these woods are full of bandits. We need to do something about it.
Hmm.
But like you pointed out, there are so many different ways of solving that. Like the quest giver doesn't care if you kill all the bandits, if you bribe them, if you convert them to the way of good. If the solution is taken care of, then that's all the quest giver cares about. But it's not all the game cares about, because obviously at that point that it's going, okay, well, now if you have converted them to good, now you have new allies, and if you've
Uh,
killed them all, then you might piss off some of the other bandits, or make them afraid of you, or whatever. So there's always consequences for your actions, but there's usually not just one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, this really goes back to well, I shouldn't say it goes back to what I'd like to say is that I am aware of a mission statement that's on waywardrealms.com. And as you're saying these things and answering, these questions, the mission statement is kind of echoing in the back of my head here, and it really rings true. A lot of mission statements tend to be, kind of like, niceties.
Sure.
But this one here, I want to read it out. And you can find this on waywardrealms.com, dear listener. Quote, choice, consequence, scope, and role playing will be experienced like never before with in depth class and combat systems, a myriad of complex and dynamic faction relations, and a realistically scaled open world where players will experience a new class of game, the Grand RPG. And so I really get that sense as we're talking tonight.
Good. Well, I mean, I will say a little bit of the history on the Grand RPG.
Hmm.
Was a possible publisher, when we were in meetings with them, started saying, "What you're really talking about here is a grand RPG," and so it is something where I can understand your skepticism, because
Yeah.
it is a bit of publisher talk. So there's a part where we said, yeah, to hell with false modesty. Yeah, well, we're gonna go with it, but it definitely is something that came more out of the business minds of a publisher than our developer minds.
But it's not inaccurate by
Yeah,
any stretch of the I mean, it is a really, from what I'm understanding, based on your design philosophy and how you're conceiving the game as you're building it. These concepts are grand. These things that you're going to allow the player to do are indeed grand. And one thing I do want to ask is about role playing. You've got, when it comes to, I think MMOs are a phenomenal example of this. You've got some people that play MMOs as role playing opportunities. These players might be few and far between, but they really sink themselves into the class that they accept at character creation. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have these folks that are min maxers, what D&D players would call metagamers.
yeah.
But it's a legitimate style of gameplay for playing an RPG on a computer. You want to make sure that you're hitting all of the maximum number requirements in order to do the maximum amount of damage to the enemies you're fighting. What's the over and under on these numbers for my character sheet? So how are you rewarding? How is this game going to reward both, or are you having to lean one on the other?
I would say, well, like really like what you said, like it's a legitimate play style, right? Some people that's what they enjoy doing. Enjoy doing. They like to see, how efficient can I be at this game? Can I master these systems? And we've got deep systems to be mastered. We're definitely there to support that play style and let people dive into these things and see what the best build that they can create is. Including like the magic system that has the spell creation. So there's lots of fun to be had there as you mix in different spell components and figure out like what works best for you. But at the same time, like the role playing is very important to us. So the aim for us with that is if you do want to actually play your role and really dive into what your character is, then we want that to be a rewarding experience. We want the game to recognize that, like we've said, like with help of the VGM and stuff, where it's recognizing like, yeah, this person is playing like a paladin. They are trying to do the good thing. They are, being a champion of the people. And so then we're going to throw more related quests, the recognition from the world around you that you are doing that, and really help you feel like you are playing that character. You are playing that role.
Yeah, and to kind of echo what you said, I mean, your example was, obviously from MMOs, and
Yeah.
there's several advantages to be making a single player game, and one of them has to do with uh, the differences in play styles that a single player game uh, can help, like Victor was saying, that we can say, hey, if you're going to be playing a paladin type of character, the VGM is going to recognize that and sculpt the world around, like a good game master would do, to say, hey, if you're going to be playing this type of character, I'm going to give you some challenges, um, but it's going to be a thing that I'm paying attention to what you enjoy, and we're going to be to be making along those lines, and even on the role playing side, uh, so that is a gameplay thing where if you are creating an MMO and that there are different types of players who are going to be playing this, then you have to kind of create a world for everyone, or
Yeah.
a gameplay style that's generic enough that it's all of these type of gameplay styles, or we say you're not going to allow certain things and you're going to be cutting those players off. But one of my big things that why I don't play MMOs very much is when you're talking about the different types of players that are in there, and the players who really are into the role playing thing, and they're going to be going around and acting like their character. But then you have often some of these hardcore action, let me cut through all the stuff guy, who are just gonna be like, shut up noob, and like you have to. I've worked on MMOs where you end up having to, like, okay, well, these are all lessons, and these are what people do is they find out where the spawn is, and you have to have like safe zones for new players, because if you're going to be doing a PvP system, then the other guys will go over and like wail on them and steal their shit, and go,
Right.
oh, okay, well, that's not fun. That's not fun for the new players, but it might be really fun for the the mean players. So again, just some advantages that come naturally for doing a single player game.
Oh yeah, I mean balance is a huge factor there. You don't have to. You can make game breaking, quote unquote, game breaking play styles, characters, and the player's going to figure that out. Like, oh, okay, I really took this to the extreme. You're not going to have throngs of players on the other side saying, that class really took this to the extreme, and now I can't get anything.
Right. Well, and then you have to go through what is the term when they take like an awesome character class and reduce its power because it was.
Oh, they nerf it.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Is
Yeah.
my tongue. So you don't have to worry about that as much because you're like, well, you're only cheating yourself. So.
Well, I want to jump into this next topic here about about the scope in the grand RPG, and well, let's get it. Yeah, let me just go ahead and get into it. Scope is a major factor, obviously, in delivering the idea of this grand RPG. Um, and but what if the choices break the game? How are you ensuring that the narrative doesn't come to a brick wall for players and halt their progress while making a decision that you couldn't foresee while creating it? I mean, I've heard you guys speak a lot about failing forward. Okay, so you took a ship to go someplace, but then you get marooned on an island. You're not dead. You did fail, but you're gonna fail forward. You're now gonna have an opportunity on that island. What if the player makes a decision that you can't foresee right now? How are you ensuring that they don't make a game breaking choice, or how are you ensuring that the system is going to understand that this might be a game breaking choice and help them to either fail forward or succeed forward?
I have a one-word answer. So, if Victor, you want to give your take, and then I'll.
Sure. Well, basically, I don't really think it's possible with our system because it is being designed with that failing forward in mind. So even though you might fail an objective, your quest giver is angry with you, a very important NPC is dead, that just means some really interesting stuff just happened. That means the world is going to go in a pretty different direction than what you thought it was going. And again, it kind of comes back to the faction systems, and you might be allies with one faction, but that means that you're also enemies with their enemies. And if you did something that hurt that faction, well, the enemies are going to like that. So maybe some new opportunities have opened up for you somewhere else that you didn't foresee, as opposed to you just being, out of luck.
Interesting. So putting the old thinking cap on here. I mean, players are really, and I say this about myself in particular. So when I play a game, I'm not used to thinking about the game in that way. I'm used to thinking about it in a way of, well, I just screwed up, and therefore I'm not going to be able to, move in that same direction. I'm not thinking about, okay, this is an actual world, and my enemies have enemies. Let me appeal to them. I'm thinking, I screwed up. I made an enemy out of these people. Now what am I going to do? Nothing. I got to reload my game save. Instead of so you're asking players to think about their progress in the game as if it were their own real life progress. You failed at work. You got fired. Now what are you going to do? You can't reload your game save. You got to find a way to get another job. So that's a very interesting position.
And it's definitely a hard ask. It was even hard to get our writers in that mindset too, because we're so used to that play style already, right? You didn't meet your objective. It's you just got to reload. And even doing writers, one of the things that I was constantly getting after them is like, we don't use the word fail, right? There's no such thing as a fail state in Wayward Realms. It's just a different consequence.
But yeah, when you're rating a quest, you do have to, that is the way, to think about it. Like Victor said, is to say, all right, so at the end of this, the bandit the bandits of the forest are no longer attacking people. Quest successful, and the bandits are still attacking people. Quest not successful, and to think, like Victor said, to say it's not quest not successful. It's meaning, okay, well, the bandits are still on there. This is where things start spreading from that. The thing I was going to say when you had asked the question initially, that was because when you talk about it, like making a quest, screwing up a quest, as a player, is the way we get around all of that is one of the traditions we're not carrying over from the early Elder Scrolls is the bugs. So I wrote down like my one word answer was going to be testing. So like we do want to make sure that there's not a thing. In fact, we were talking about it in the writers meeting today because we were talking about durations of quests and how to calculate like how much time it is for the player to accomplish something, and talking about how that's calculated, because it does need to be something that's figured out. So if I'm the quest giver and I'm sending you off to the opposite end of the archipelago for something, and you've only been given 2 days, then that's an impossible quest. So we that, but that's the sort of thing that
Right.
if unless that we do have actually unreliable quest givers, by the way. So it is possible that you could be given a quest that on the surface was technically impossible, but it opens up something else. But if we didn't mean to do that, then testing should be able to say, um,
Right.
is it okay that this quest is technically completely bananas and impossible? And I'm like, oh no, we need to fix that. So
Yeah.
if the failure is something that is impossible to avoid, and players don't like we can have unreliable quest givers that can have a satisfactory overall storyline on that, but players don't like to be a challenge is one thing, an impossibility is another. So.
I like that. I like the stance that Once Lost Games has on impossible quests. It's okay when we do it.
It's a feature.
Of course. Of course.
So obviously, that's a really cool idea that you could have a quest giver that gives you something that is not meant to be done in the way that you think, but then it's going to progress forward in a very different way. And I like that. That's very cool. And I'm glad to hear that there's going to be a really robust testing period, because I think that kind of gets these ideas of large role playing games. That really kind of is kind of like the death knell for these games is that the testing for some reason wasn't robust enough, and it ships with a lot of bugs.
Yeah.
And becomes a major issue.
And again, as a game, even if you're just talking about the scope of the game, the size of the map, we need to have feet on the ground, the place to be completely explored before because we don't want to, oh look, the proc gen made a really weird choice over here, we need to fix that up. But until we actually have a player go over there and say, yep, that's this is the problem, we wouldn't know.
Somehow it constructed an entire log cabin out of deer antlers.
Well, the story was, and it wasn't until I think it it was the first book that I ever wrote for Daggerfall, was because of a bug that was discovered like a year after Arena was released. Because we hadn't explored the entire place, and it was Proc Gen 2, where you had city blocks that would be rotated around, and one of the rules on the city block creation is that all north, south, east, and west all had to be open, so that when they rotated into each other and the two sides connected, you could get from one end to the other. But for some reason, one block was blocking the city gates, and it was an armory store that was sitting in front of the city gates. So when you traveled to that town, you teleported in the middle of the town. But when you tried to leave, you had to leave through the city gates, and you couldn't, because you couldn't reach the city gates because there was an armory store in the way. And so I, of course, had to make up a whole story about why that was the case, and like a mythology which was born off of that. But again, it was a thing where it took a long time, because it was a huge world that somebody just had not gone to that particular. Nobody had gone to that particular town and discovered that it was a trap.
Wow. And how was the bug fixed, or was it? It was just never
It was
fixed.
never fixed. I mean,
I
at
see.
that point, we moved on to Daggerfall. So that's why I just wrote a story that said I made up this whole myth about a king who made a unwise wish of I think it was like it was certain. I wasn't on drugs. I promise, but it was it might as well it was he made a wish to a magic wombat, and and it was that there'd be a because his town was losing all of the population, and he said, "I wish there would just be one building, one business that would never leave." And so the wombat who didn't like him had to be this one armory shop that would never leave, and they all starved to death in the town because they couldn't leave.
Oh my gosh! Was the player able to fast travel out of the town once they got
No,
in?
no.
Oh,
You fast travel. You could fast travel in, but you couldn't fast travel out.
so that was it. That halted your whole
Yeah,
progress. Oh my
yeah.
god!
You got stuck in that. Maybe we did fix it. I think we did might have fixed a few bugs in Arena after like the CD-ROM release. So maybe we did fix it, but
Yeah.
it was a bug that we didn't discover until well after it was released. So
Wow, unbelievable. I love these little stories that you give us, Ted. These are great little nuggets. I love them. I really do. Um, all right. So we got a couple of questions here that actually came from Discord. Are you gentlemen game for some community questions?
nah,
Nah. It's like
It's getting
not feeling
late.
it. Sure.
I know it's like Russian roulette. You never really know what you're
That's
gonna
right. That's right.
get. Especially from our Discord channel. We've got some
Well,
really
we've got a pretty great group of people on our Discord channel. And
oh yeah. Okay, so this one comes from Axiom SA4 and quote Axiom says this: is it going to follow a more simple system akin to Skyrim where you click to hit, hold to block, and just move away to dodge? Or can we expect a bit more depth to it with directional melee and blocking, unless you have a shield, similar to Mountain Blade Warband?
how much have we actually talked about combat by now, Victor?
I think we've explained the system a good bit.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm always kind of wary about how much stuff we've is has been revealed. I mean, there's obviously stuff uh, that's still under in design documents and only halfway implemented. Until you actually are playing it, you're not really sure. But it's definitely a lot deeper than Skyrim already.
but I think like to the particulars of that question, I would say like it's sort of two different modes that we're aiming for. So one would be not really simplistic, but traditional. You click the mouse button, you swing your weapon kind of thing, while the other is the more like Daggerfall directional focused mouse swings, and you can kind of just switch between them on the fly by like locking onto an enemy, and once you lock in, you're able to do the directional combat. But you can always, you have your choice of which one you want to do. Um, as far as like the actual combat, it is, I think, more deep than say like something like Skyrim, because we do have different options like dodging or a dedicated kick button, so you can kind of, you know, you have more movement options as you're fighting enemies.
Nice. Very cool. I like the dedicated kick button too.
It's definitely a favorite of the community and the team.
Yeah, I saw the in one of the trailers. The character had kicked the skeleton and it broke apart, and I thought that was just so cool. And it's
Very
cool.
satisfying.
Yeah, something like that's not locked behind like a monk play style. Like you don't need to be a monk in order to kick a skeleton.
Mhm.
That's cool. All
Exactly.
right.
Well, it was funny because that was I think the thing that the people who we did a Daggerfall first dungeon video a year or two ago, and the people who had actually played Daggerfall before knew that like when you were facing a skeleton or you're facing just about anyone, then hand to hand is kind of the way to go in general. That there's a whole lot of like, oh, an iron dagger won't do any good against this guy, but a kick always helps.
Okay, so next question here comes from the user She Was Here and wants to know, quote, once Ted's on the podcast, will you please ask him how far along his book Fool Me Once is?
Yeah, it's I've got a big chunk of it done. I've got a couple months to go, so it's it's coming along. It's an interesting. Obviously, I've always been a writer, and really enjoy writing fantasy stories. It's an interesting thing of creating the world with the rest of my team while I'm creating this novel. So the novel is set in a world that we are. I've got a team that's world building, and and then they'll be part. And Victor, is probably the biggest victim of all of this. Where I go like, well, what was that? What was it? The name of the queen that did this, and something that happened in the historic past, and I couldn't find it on our internal wiki, and so yeah, there's a part of where there's some it's really fun to be working on it, but there are parts where you go like, okay, well, some of these things I'm going to be establishing in the book and just telling the team to be on board. But there's a lot of stuff that, because we've been working on this game, for 5 years of world building, that it both has a lot of uh, things that are vaguely familiar to me, that I go like, I recall that we, in the Civil War, that we had this battle that was going on. Do we have a year for that yet? Do we, and so at that point, then we're ironing out things that, don't have to do with early access, build. So
Right.
I'm kind of, doing this, it's kind of out of the way, but it's also, very involved in that. So, there's a good chunk of it that's done. I think I'm going to be revisiting it up until publication, just as something changes. So
Yeah, it sounds like it. How many times has something regarding world building in Wayward Realms re-informed your novel here, and you thought to yourself like, oh man, I got to go back and rewrite that chapter now?
I mean, it happens. It happens, but a lot of it was because it's a prequel to the game, and like I said, we spent a lot of time world building. So there's a lot of the history that's already done, and we are building the game based on that, and I'm building my novel to kind of inform that. So I think that it probably goes both ways a lot.
All right. And then follow-up question comes from Jackson5. Quote,
All right.
Will there be an audiobook?
We haven't discussed it. Maybe.
Yeah, probably not anytime soon, but I think that would be definitely something that would be fun to look into. Maybe get
Stephen
somebody
Fry.
with a really great voice to do
Ian
that for
McKellen.
us.
What's that, Ted?
I was saying Stephen Fry, Ian McKellen.
Oh, that both would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I mean, the funny one would be, I mean, Stephen Fry, because he obviously reads all of the Harry Potter books, and he will do. It's not like a silly woman's voice when he's reading dialogue from female characters. But there's a little bit of that. I can't imagine Ian McKellen doing doing like a female character in dialogue's voice, but
He's got such a deep, voice too at
yeah,
times.
yeah,
It's
it might be a little unsettling if he does that. So
This
we'll
is
see.
us throwing that challenge out there to him.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Prove us wrong, Ian.
Please, Sir Ian McKellen, please. And our final question from our awesome Discord community. By the way, folks, please keep them coming in. I love reading your questions and topics every single day. This one comes from, hopefully I'm saying this right, Malachi, Malaquias. Is it Malachi? Malachi? Quote, being the spiritual successor to a 1996 game can be very appealing to seasoned players. I'm old, lol. But perhaps hard to digest for new players. What elements makes Wayward Realms a game that maintains the essence of the original that many love in a game relevant in 2025? With what mechanics or elements do you think you can attract new players based on a game from 1996?
Well,
I think this is something that we've sort of touched on before, where I don't think like the mechanics were ever really an issue. With the older games, those classic games, even though like they're like we think of them as being like notoriously hard or something. But I think it was just like those little quality of life improvements that have come along since and that were missing back then. Say like WASD for walking, mouse look, that kind of stuff that was missing back then that now seems like really, it's a standard now, and it seems really hard to go back and try to play these old games. So I think like one of the things we are doing is making those quality of life improvements to the the classic design philosophies. So I think as far as that, like we do have that sort of accessibility that those older games didn't when you try to go back to them.
Hmm.
And I think it's just like the promise of that openness to the game, I think, can be attractive to them, and hopefully they'll see it's not as daunting as trying to get into Daggerfall in 2025 when you're used to much newer games. So
and I'll probably add to that there are, uh, I mean, Julian, Eric, and I are the old school ones on there, but we're definitely the people who have that history of and whatnot. Luckily, we've got this great group of developers who have been with us for quite a while, but not all of them have played Daggerfall.
Right.
We had a writers meeting a few hours ago, and I can't remember what the exact thing that they came up where some writer had a question about something, and they were like, it's kind of like in Daggerfall, I haven't played that yet, and but
Well,
but it's also good because then it's a part where like wouldn't this be a better way of doing it? And if it sticks with the philosophy, but it's a modern take on it, we'll hear them out. So
yeah,
it's not a thing of like a spiritual successor does not mean a copy of it. So
right.
you could say like we said, these are the pillars of the philosophy, and again, the game may not be for everyone, but I do think it's a part where one of the quotes or one of the things I think we've often say. I don't know if we ever use this in marketing materials. Is why I'm thinking of it was something like, "This is the game you didn't know that you wanted to play." To some degree, we're going like, okay, this old school stuff is not stuff that you are used to playing. So we're introducing a bunch of new things to you, and if your dad or your older brother or whatever did used to play Daggerfall in the day, they might go like, oh yeah, that was that's the way that's what it was way it was back in my day.
That's the way it was back in that firing at the old.
I remember 1997.
I think one great feature that I think would be really a great example of this question here would be the keyword driven conversations with NPCs in the game. I mean, it's still the direction, right? You're not going to have uh, are you not having any dialogue, voice acted dialogue in the game, or is it just mostly not voice acted dialogue?
This is a major topic of contention.
Yeah,
Oh,
we'll have like just small things like greetings, battle cries, usual like grunts and and ambient chatter, stuff like
Yeah.
that. But
oh,
as far as like the actual like spoken dialogue, we're not going to be planning for that.
I mean, people will constantly be, because people are expecting that.
Yeah.
That they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to do that. And like, no, I mean, there's way too much dialogue, too much text and dialogue and everything like that in the game. And then people go like, oh, with AI, things are getting better. And I'm like, yeah, that just falls in the category of like, if it's something, again, technologically, it comes out and it's flawless and we can localize it into, and then all of a sudden then I start getting worried about like, okay, well, we've played a whole lot of the game. We haven't come across anything weird. I've directed people in doing voice acting in games, and we've done like 3 or 4 takes on like professional voice actors. Going like, oh, you didn't get that this point was supposed to be sarcastic, and this other thing is what and going like, okay, well, maybe we get it perfect for English, but for every foreign language that we want to do it in, like now we need to have testers
Right.
doing that. But people say like, we don't know where AI is going to be on voice acting in a couple years, and going like, well, I'm pretty much thinking it's not going to happen, but or my concerns are if they swear that it's going to happen, I still want to test a ton. But I'm not going to. I'm not a Luddite who's would turn his back on spoken dialogue if the technology is flawless.
You can always tell AI voice acting too. It's gotten a lot better, but I mean, whenever I can always detect it whenever I see like a YouTube short, even like a very like a 10-second long YouTube short, you can detect it. It's always like I can tell you this 3
Oh
things that
right.
I'm like, okay, this is AI voice acted.
And it's even weird when you do have real actors doing it that like, to bring up Skyrim, Linda Carter was the voice of all the female lords in Skyrim.
Yeah.
So they all sound like Linda Carter. And
Right.
you go like, they're still all individuals. So, at that point, then you go like, oh, now we have to, tweak every NPC so they all have, this guy has a little bit of this accent, and
Yeah.
have all those AI tools that you say this guy has a high squeaky voice.
I'm sure that would an AI voice actor would nail that right on the head.
Yeah.
It's okay though. I got the perfect sales pitch for us.
What's that?
You've all heard of the silent protagonist. We're
Yep.
introducing the deaf protagonist.
There you go. That's right.
Very good.
Setting new trends here.
I also like the idea that it's just a stylistic choice, again, harkening back to the CRPG days where, obviously you couldn't have, that technology just wasn't present. And, I think, Ted, you had said earlier, the game may not actually be for everyone. Bold statement, especially in our day and age where everyone is trying to make everything for everybody. I mean, Hollywood's a really fantastic example of this, where they'll take a movie that originally, a superhero movie like Captain America. They're trying to figure out how to sell and market Captain America to, markets on the other side of the world that are obviously don't have,
Yeah.
the exact Western values that Captain America
I
has.
was going to say some people that the name would be a big issue.
Right, exactly. So how do you do that? Well, maybe Captain America isn't. Maybe that's a movie not for them. Well, that's not an answer for Hollywood. They don't want to hear that answer, and it's refreshing to hear OnceLost Games kind of make that statement of we're trying to make the game for everybody, but if you don't like it, well, I guess that's okay too.
Oh yeah, no, and like we've said during the course of this, we were talking about the importance of role playing and playing different type. We want different types of players to play our game who like to play the game in different ways. But again,
Yeah,
it's if you're somebody who likes linearity, then our game is not we're not making that game.
not that. Yeah, and if you have to have everything voice acted,
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
It's not that type of game either. And I think that's refreshing, and I think that's bold, and I think that's something that a lot of folks can really respect. Okay.
So.
Well, I
We
want to.
want to sell some games, so we're hoping that there's a big enough people who would want to play this. So
I think based on the community that you're cultivating and certainly the the response that you received and continue to receive, I think that definitely says that there's a huge group of people out there that are chomping at the bit to play this game.
Kickstarter alone, pointed that out. So
Sure. You gentlemen have been incredibly generous with your time today. We went a little longer than planned, but thank you so much. So I just want to thank you for being with us today, and that's great. I want to ask Ted and then Ted and then Victor. Do you have any final thoughts on the Grand RPG today?
I mean, again, like I said, the term, if it made you a little cautious at first, I can totally get that. But it was at least a term that was at least it was given to us. But we recognized that okay, well, it is a little marketing, but it fits. So we said, like I said, to hell with false modesty. Well, this is what we're making, and we've stayed to that path.
Right. Well, as I say, if the shoe fits, and it definitely does. Victor, final thoughts?
Well, like as far as the grand RPG, just knowing what we're working on, knowing what we're aiming for, all the blood, sweat, and tears we're putting into this thing, it honestly does fit. Like just like for me personally, because it is really grand. Like this is something that's really special, and I think that grand fits it just perfectly.
It's nice to hear game developers speak so honestly and so emotionally about their project.
Victor's gonna cry.
It's not. I don't know how common that is these days. It doesn't seem very common, but it's really great to hear that all the passion that everyone on the team just exudes for this game is really refreshing, and I think it makes all of us who are waiting to play it that much more excited about it.
Good.
Okay, well, listen, dear listener, thank you for listening and downloading. Please wishlist the Wayward Realms on Steam. It's a massive help. You can hang out with us on Discord at waywardrealms.com. You can get the link there. Also, follow us on all social at OnceLost Games, and be sure to like, share, and smash that notification bell on YouTube at OnceLost Games. We'll see you in our travels, and until then, happy exploring.